Grace to you and peace from God the Father, and from our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ.
Microphone on, I know that. Don't turn the volume up. Flip the switch. It's good to see you here tonight. It's a beautiful night. We're looking like we're going to get some snow. White Christmas. That's a lovely gift from God on this table. It took me a little longer than usual to assemble or gather my thoughts and write a sermon for this Christmas Eve. Usually this is something I do a couple of weeks in advance. But it's been a busy month and my mind has been distracted. I began by going back and looking at all the previous Christmas Eve sermons I've written. I won't tell you how many there were, but suffice it to say, the first ones were written when Ronald Reagan was the president, so more than two. I was looking for something profound to say, something meaningful, because, well, it's hard to talk to family service. You have little ones that are here and they're not quite sure what to do. But the challenge for me tonight isn't any different than it was for me, from some years ago when Reagan was the president and I preached my first sermon. The challenge tonight is to say something that will enrich a story that you already know. A story that the whole world sort of knows. Every year I used to complain to my wife about this, saying, it's so hard to write a sermon for Christmas Eve, and she'd always give me the same advice, so I quit asking her what she thought. She'd say, quit worrying about it. People aren't coming to hear you preach anyway. They're coming to light candles and to sing songs and watch their kids and get home at a decent hour. I buy that. It's still the truth. They come to hear the story. That's why they come. And she's right then, and she's right now. Every preacher knows it. Every preacher would gladly turn Christmas Eve over to children and choirs because, frankly, they do a better job than we do. But this is a Lutheran church. It's a gathering of word and sacrament. Lutherans don't feel like they've been to churches. They've heard a sermon and passed around a plate. Far be it from me to violate the tradition of the Lutheran church. And I'm glad you're here. Sometimes on Christmas Eve, preachers get a little feisty. We look out to a room of people that many of them we haven't seen or we haven't met. We want to wish them, a happy Thanksgiving, because we know that for the most part that's the next time we'll see this many people. Some of these people. So just in case. Now I would never do that, of course. Wait a minute. Let me get that off. If you only go to church one night a year, one day a year, this is the day to go. Because the whole world stops on Christmas Eve to listen to the story it already knows. Believers and non-believers alike listen to the story which, if true, is the most important story ever told. So welcome, I'm glad you're here, and thanks to the many people who made this service work tonight, who are still out there making it work. The volunteers who organized it and organized 50-plus children, who moved everything around to provide for not just this service, but the one this morning and the one later on. The families who ushered, the children who read and sang, all of them have given their Christmas Eve over to telling the story. No event in human history has been seen the source of more art and more music than the story about Jesus' birth. If you took the Christian story out of Western civilization's art and music, there wouldn't be a lot left. Great artists have painted it numerous times. It's inspired some of the most sublime music ever composed. There is Bach's Cantata, the Magnificat, Handel's Messiah, most beloved of all the carols that you have sung, and we're going to sing some more. It has inspired also a singular and unique tradition, which you saw a little bit tonight. The attempt to come as close to the story as possible by reenacting it. This was first done by St. Francis of Assisi. He organized a nativity in his own little town and invited all the people to organize to be a part of it, a living nativity using real people, real animals. The people of Assisi loved it. It's become part of our regular Christmas traditions. Now, I collect nativity sets. Here's a few of the ones that I have in my office. Let's see. Yeah, that's my favorite. The one on the bottom is the one that my mother bought at the Five and Dime when she was a small girl. She went down every week for weeks and took her babysitting money and bought it. I still have it in my office on display. But the best of all for me are the children's Christmas pageants. There's something irresistible and wonderful about children who are dressed up like angels and shepherds and wise men and sheep and cows and whatever. We consider getting rid of the pageants here because, well, frankly, every year the competition for Mary and Joseph was fierce. It's kind of tough, Or talk, who's going to get it this year? And then we would, shake the bones and, consult the entrails of the goat. And the pastor's kids usually went out. So everybody wants to be a part of the pageant, so we resolved the issue by expanding the size of the flocks and of the heavenly choir. We got creative and found places around the manger for lions and dogs and any other critter that we could think of, and we just threw children up on the stage sometimes when they would come late and say, I want to be a part of it. Just go up there and sing away in the manger. It'll be fun. It'll be great. What would Christmas be without a pageant? The classic story about a pageant, however, is my favorite one. This one, Barbara Robinson's Best Christmas Pageant Ever, which is narrated by a little girl whose mother had the unfortunate task of taking over for the traditional pageant director who broke her leg. She decides she's doing it. And before the first rehearsal, she decides that she's going to do something different she hasn't done. She's going to tell the story of the birth of Jesus to the whole cast. She's going to read it, the story you heard today. And the cast includes, this year, six of the worst kids anybody's ever met. The horrible herdmans. There's Ralph and Imogene and Ollie and Claude and Leroy and Gladys. And through a series of unfortunate events, each of them ends up becoming one of the major characters in the pageant. Imogene, who is mean and difficult to talk to, she becomes the Virgin Mary. Ralph becomes Joseph. Ollie and Leroy and Claude become the three wise men, and the youngest, Gladys, becomes the angel Gabriel. And here's the deal. These kids have never heard the Christmas story. Not once. And when this was first published back in the 70s or the 80s, it seemed outlandish to think that anyone in our culture could grow up and not actually hear the Christmas story. But last week, I had a lot of running around to do. I spent more time in my car than I usually do, and the car radio this time of the year is set on 106.5, right? The Christmas station here in Dayton. And I listened to the songs, the traditional songs, the wonderful songs that we all heard, and I kept track after a while because I realized something was missing. And so I started counting. 35 songs I counted over the course of several days, and only 2 of them mentioned the birth of Christ. I heard all about Frosty and Rudolph, Winter Wonderland and Sleigh Ride, Merry Christmas, Darling, the Carpenters, The Most Wonderful Time of the Year by every man who ever could sing, and the ever-popular All I Want for Christmas Is You. And you know what I think of that, but in case you don't, the most horrible piece of Christmas music ever written. God, save me from another rendition, that stupid piece. Not that I have an opinion. Now, it seems that we have some work to do as a culture, particularly as a church, because the children that I'm learning or meeting around here, they don't know the Christmas story. It's not like we read it every week, in church. You hear it once a year, here. And they're not getting on the radio, they're not getting on TV. The things that we used to rely upon to teach our kids the good things, they're not doing it. Anyway, the pageant director in Robinson's book reads the story to the horrible herdmans for the first time, and these children are transfixed by it. I'm quoting, Joseph and Mary, his espoused wife, being great with child, she began to read. Pregnant, yelled Ralph. Well, that stirred things up. All the big kids began to giggle, and all the little kids wanted to know what was funny, and my mother had to hammer the floor with a blackboard pointer to get people's attention. That's enough, Ralph, she said, and she went on with the story. Alice, my friend, leaned over and whispered to me, I don't think it's very nice to say Mary was pregnant. But she was, I pointed out. Even though in a way I agreed with Alice, pregnant sounds so ordinary. Even though in a way, everybody can get pregnant. Great for child sounded so much better for Mary. Well, I'm not supposed to talk about people being pregnant, Alice said, pulling her hands in her lap. I think I better tell my mother. Tell her what? Tell her that your mother is talking about people being pregnant in church. But I thought to myself, that's the whole point of the story. Anybody can get pregnant. It's a very simple story. It's a very human story. And at the heart of it is the truth that, well, anybody can get pregnant. In the 17th year of the reign of Augustus Caesar, Quirinius was the governor of Syria. A decree went forth from Rome that all the world should be taxed. This was the first tax. Each man was to leave the city of his birth and return to the place of his ancestors. And so Joseph went forth from Nazareth in Galilee, returned to the city of David, Bethlehem of Judea, because he was of the house of the lineage of David. He took with him Mary, his betrothed wife, who was great with child. When they arrived, the time was fulfilled that she should deliver. She gave forth birth to her firstborn son. She wrapped him in swaddling clothes, and she laid him in a manger, because there was no room for them at the inn. We believe this story is true because we know that anybody can get pregnant. Anybody can, and everybody does, find themselves in unexpected situations trying to make do. Anybody can, and everybody does, at one time or another, feel uncertain and afraid of what the future might bring. Anybody can, and everybody does, in some way or other, find themselves on a journey into the unknown. This is a real story. It's about real people. In the fields nearby, there were shepherds, keeping watch over their flocks by night. And behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to them. And the glory of the Lord shone all around them, and they were filled with fear. The angel said, "Do not be afraid, for I have come to bring you good news of great joy, which shall be to all people. For unto you is born this day in the city of David a Savior. He is the Christ. He is the Lord. And this will be a sign to you. You find a baby wrapped in swaddling clothes, lying in a manger." Then suddenly, there was with that angel a great multitude of the heavenly hosts, praising God and singing, "Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, 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 goodwill to men." When the angels had returned, the shepherds said to one another, "Let us go, even into Bethlehem, and see this wondrous thing which the Lord has made known to us." And so they went. And they found Mary and Joseph and the baby, just as the angel promised. And they made known to them all that they had heard and seen concerning this child, everything that the angels had revealed. And then they went forth into the night with loud voices, and gave thanks unto God for all that they had seen and all they had heard, everything that God had revealed to them through the angels. And Mary, having heard these things, pondered them. She kept them close to her heart. And this, dear children of God, this is the beginning of the story of our Lord, Jesus Christ. This is a real story about real people. About a God, a real God, who comes into our world in a way that no one expects, not with finery, not with fanfare, not with grandeur, not with pomp, but quietly, simply, humanly. This story makes the most amazing claim that God so loves the world, he becomes vulnerable like us. He is born like one of us. He lives in the world, laughing and loving and hoping and dreaming like one of us. And finally, incredibly, he dies like one of us. And that's why this story is so powerful. This is our story. Because you see, we know anybody can get pregnant. We know anyone can live in a small town. We know anyone can die. The story of the Nativity is a story of beauty and wonder, but it's a real story. It is our story. And it's that simple but powerful story that made such a profound impact on the 6 herdmen and children. Ralph as Joseph and Imogene as Mary brought new eyes and new ears to the story. They saw beyond the evergreens and the poinsettias, beyond the choirs in robes and the angels in white, beyond the 3 magi from the east, beyond the music and the words. What they saw was a mom and a dad and a baby. They saw God permeating the ordinary with hope and promise. And when Claude and Ollie and Leroy, who played the 3 wise men, bring gifts to the baby Jesus, they don't bring gold and frankincense and myrrh. They bring the Christmas ham from the food basket the congregation had given to their family. Even the narrator is amazed. The herdmans had never in their lives given anything away. And when it was time for the wise men to leave, they didn't. It was like they couldn't. They just sat there. It was anything that anyone could do about it. Made perfect sense to me. They had, after all, come from a very far place. As for ruining the pageant, which everyone feared they would when they were cast, it seems to me they improved it a lot by doing what came naturally. Like thinking a ham is a better present for a poor family than oil that smells good. I wish the pageant would go on with the herdmans in charge to see what else they might do. Maybe the wise man would tell Mary about Herod and she'd go tell him to go back and light our heads off, or maybe Joseph would go with him and put an end to that Herod guy altogether. I was so busy planning new ways to end the story, I didn't see Imogen. I was so wrapped up. I didn't pay attention, but when I did, I almost dropped my handle on the angel in front of me, because Imogen Herdman was crying. Mean old Imogen, who never had a good word to say about anybody, who threatened to clobber us if we touched her baby. She was crying. You just stood there, crying and crying, as if Christmas had come over her all of a sudden like a fever. Her eyes shining with tears in the candlelight. She didn't try to wipe them off. It was the best Christmas pageant ever. Everybody thought so, and to this day, whenever I think of the Christmas story, Mary looks to me like Imogen, hurt, nervous and bewildered, ready to clobber anyone who lays a hand on her baby. And the wise men will always be Leroy and Claude and Ollie, bringing the baby Jesus a Christmas ham. We gather tonight in the candlelight, sing carols and hear the story once again. Like the shepherds with their vision of angels, we come to meet Jesus. Then we will go back into the world, back into the fields, back into our ordinary lives. But you will not leave this place unchanged. Not if you found Jesus here. Oh no. In this story, in the sacrament, you will meet the Lord. And you will know that God comes into our world, into our lives, and into our futures, and that anyone can get pregnant. Christmas will come over you like a fever, because this story is about you. It's about us. So come to Bethlehem and see him whose birth the angels sing. Come, adore on bended knee, Christ